During a high-powered networking event at Marwood Estate, the luxury boutique hotel I help manage, I couldn't believe my ears. My estranged brother Griffin was boasting to a group of potential investors about how our family's ownership allowed him to bypass all the normal rules and procedures. "The hotel is in the family," Griffin proclaimed with a smug grin. "We can get things done without all the red tape. Just tell the staff what you want, and they'll make it happen." I cringed inwardly, my skin crawling at his blatant disregard for professionalism and ethics. Marwood Estate had built an impeccable reputation over decades through hard work and a commitment to excellence, not by exploiting our name for personal gain. As Griffin continued regaling his business contacts with tales of how he could secure outrageous requests, I found myself gripping my champagne flute tighter. This was precisely the kind of entitled behavior that had driven a wedge between us in recent years. "Excuse me," I interjected, unable to stay silent any longer. "I couldn't help but overhear. I want to clarify that our staff follows strict protocols to ensure fair treatment of all guests." Griffin's eyes narrowed as he registered my presence. "Lila, I didn't realize you were lurking around." "I'm not lurking," I replied evenly. "I'm working, unlike you." A tense silence fell over our group, the other attendees shifting uncomfortably. Griffin and I had always been oil and water, but his recent actions had pushed us to a new low. "I'm simply letting my colleagues know about the perks of doing business with us," Griffin said, his voice dripping with condescension. "But I wouldn't expect you to understand the finer points of deal-making." I opened my mouth to respond, but a familiar voice cut me off. "Is there a problem here?" I turned to see Marcus, Marwood's general manager, regarding the situation with concern. "Not at all," Griffin said smoothly. "My sister and I were just catching up." Marcus's brow furrowed, clearly unconvinced. I shot him a subtle shake of my head, silently conveying that I had it under control, for now. As Griffin steered the conversation back to business, I found myself filled with a simmering dread. His flagrant disregard for the hotel's values could have far-reaching consequences if left unchecked. For the sake of our family legacy, I knew I needed to confront this issue head-on, no matter how unpleasant the confrontation might be. After the networking event, Griffin's behavior only grew more outrageous. He seemed to delight in flaunting his supposed authority, constantly name-dropping our family connection and making increasingly unreasonable demands of the hotel staff. "This is the penthouse suite you've prepared for me?" Griffin sneered at the front desk manager, Marcus trailing closely behind with an apologetic expression. "Sir, you didn't actually reserve a room," Marcus explained patiently. "We'd be happy to accommodate you in one of our deluxe suites if they're still available." Griffin waved a dismissive hand. "I don't need a reservation. Just put me in the penthouse, and make sure the staff knows to cater to my every whim." My blood boiled as I watched this exchange from across the lobby. Marcus caught my eye, silently pleading for assistance in reining in my insufferable brother. "Griffin," I called out, approaching the pair. "You can't just demand the penthouse without a booking. We have actual paying guests with confirmed reservations." "Oh, look who it is," Griffin said mockingly. "The rule enforcer herself, here to ruin everyone's fun as usual." I took a steadying breath, refusing to be baited. "The penthouse is currently occupied, but Marcus can look into upgrading you to one of our executive suites at a discounted rate if you'd like." "A discounted rate?" Griffin looked affronted. "I'm not some random rube off the street. This is my family's hotel." Several nearby guests turned to gawk at the commotion, and I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. Be that as it may, we have policies in place to ensure fairness for all our patrons. If you wanted the penthouse, you should have booked it in advance like everyone else. Griffin opened his mouth, doubtless prepared to launch another tirade, but Marcus swiftly intervened. "Sir, perhaps we could discuss this more privately in my office?" Marcus suggested, ever the soul of discretion. With a huff of indignation, Griffin stalked off towards the manager's office, Marcus trailing after him like a concerned parent. I could only hope Marcus would be able to talk some sense into my bull-headed brother before his ridiculous antics caused an even bigger scene. Unfortunately, that hope was swiftly dashed over the following days. If anything, Griffin seemed to relish creating chaos, shamelessly exploiting the family name to sidestep rules and rack up exorbitant charges on an unregistered account. Complaints about his arrogance and sense of entitlement began trickling in, first from disgruntled staff members and then from other guests. More than once, I was called upon to intervene when his loud, obnoxious behavior caused a disturbance in the main dining room or lounge areas. "Griffin, you're disturbing the other patrons," I hissed through gritted teeth as I approached his table one evening. He was regaling a group of vacuous socialites with some no doubt embellished tale, all of them guffawing uproariously over glasses of Marwood's finest whiskey. "Don't be such a buzzkill, Lila," he shot back with a taunting grin. "We're just having a little fun." "At the expense of everyone else trying to enjoy their evening," I countered, struggling to keep my temper in check. "If you can't keep it down, I'll have to ask you to take your party elsewhere." The socialites responded with theatrical gasps of indignation, but Griffin simply chuckled. "You always did lack a sense of humor," he sneered. "But fine, have it your way, for now." He knocked back the remainder of his drink and slammed the glass down with a decisive thunk. "We'll take this party somewhere with less stuffy management." With a series of mocking chuckles, Griffin swept out of the dining room, his entourage of sycophants trailing behind like ducklings waddling after their mother. I watched them go with a sinking feeling, knowing this was just the beginning of the storm brewing on the horizon. Griffin's antics reached a new low at the gala event he insisted on hosting at Marwood Estate. Against my better judgment, I had allowed him to organize an extravagant soiree, hoping it would help restore some of his tarnished reputation among the city's elite social circles. In retrospect, that was a grave miscalculation on my part. The evening began with Griffin strutting around like a peacock, schmoozing with high-profile guests and loudly proclaiming his grand vision for the family business. I kept a watchful eye from a discreet distance, Martinez, Marwood's general manager, stationed nearby in case intervention was required. At first, the event proceeded relatively smoothly, our attentive staff ensuring each guest's needs were met with our usual standards of excellence. That is, until an unfortunate incident during the main course service. "You call this fine dining?" Griffin's booming voice cut through the genteel atmosphere like a cannon blast. He was glaring disdainfully at a visibly flustered server holding an empty plate. "I've had better meals on a cross-town flight." The young man's face blanched as every eye in the room turned towards the commotion. I'm so sorry, sir. Perhaps if you could explain what was unsatisfactory." "Are you hard of hearing?" Griffin sneered. "The food was an insult, that's the problem. I should have known better than to entrust something so important to the sort of incompetent hired help my sister staffs this place with." A chorus of gasps rippled across the crowd as the server's expression crumpled. Horrified, I immediately started pushing my way through the throngs of onlookers. "What is going on here?" I demanded once I reached Griffin's table. The discarded plate sat bare, the dinner clearly having already been consumed despite his callous complaint. "Your idiot employee served me a subpar meal, that's the problem," Griffin said imperiously. "I require better service befitting my standing." "Our chef is one of the most respected in the city," I countered, placing a supportive hand on the mortified server's arm. "If you were unsatisfied, you could have articulated that in a respectful manner rather than berating the staff." "Oh, don't be such a self-righteous bitch," Griffin spat, his veneer of civility cracking. "This is exactly why I never wanted you in charge. You let the hired help walk all over you." A shocked murmur traveled through the crowd at his unforgivably crass language. The server made a tremulous attempt to slink away unnoticed, but I gave his arm a reassuring squeeze to stop him. "Sir, if you cannot conduct yourself with basic decorum, I'll have to ask you to leave," I said evenly, turning my attention back to Griffin. "You'll ask me to leave?" He let out a bark of laughter. "In case you've forgotten, dear sister, this is our hotel." "Which I manage," I countered, keeping my voice low but firm. "And I won't allow you to mistreat my employees or ruin an event with your entitled tantrum." I could see the vein pulsing in Griffin's forehead as his face mottled red with anger. For a moment, it seemed he might actually strike me in front of all the witnesses. Instead, he slammed his fork down with a clatter and pushed back from the table, nearly upending it. Have it your way, he growled through gritted teeth. This charade of an event is a bore anyway. I'm out of here. With that parting shot, he stormed out of the ballroom as affronted guests hastily cleared a path. A pall fell over the room, and I found myself at a loss for words, gripped by warring feelings of humiliation and fury. This transgression would not go unanswered. Griffin had crossed a line, and I would ensure he faced the consequences, no matter how unpleasant that confrontation might become. The integrity of Marwood's legacy depended on it. In the aftermath of Griffin's outburst at the gala, the consequences were swift and severe. Negative reviews lambasting his appalling behavior began flooding Marwood's online listings and social media pages almost immediately. Avoid this place at all costs, one scalding review began. The owner's brother is a vulgar, disrespectful pig who delights in debasing the staff and ruining events with his drunken antics. Another warned, if you value basic decency and class, avoid Marwood Estate until they rid themselves of the odious man-child who fancies himself an owner. With each fresh comment and complaint, I felt my stomach clench tighter. Griffin's reckless actions were directly impacting Marwood's hard-earned reputation in a very public, very damaging way. And the worst was still to come. Cancellations for upcoming events and reservations started pouring in shortly after the backlash began. Longtime loyal patrons cited Griffin's behavior as the driving force behind their decisions to take their business elsewhere. I'm so sorry, Lila, but we simply can't continue exposing ourselves and our clients to that sort of unhinged conduct, one longtime corporate client explained over the phone, his tone deeply apologetic. Marwood has always been a byword for class and professionalism. We hope you're able to resolve this situation swiftly. By the end of the week, Martinez informed me that several potential investors had backed out of upcoming meetings, put off by the mounting negative publicity surrounding Griffin's antics. It was a devastating financial blow on top of the public humiliation. I knew I had to confront my brother directly and put a stop to this downward spiral before it went any further. Pulling every scrap of damning evidence, negative reviews, email complaints, financial forecasts, I compiled an airtight dossier detailing the fallout his actions had wrought. When I finally tracked Griffin down, he was lounging poolside with a couple of vapid social media influencers, lazily sipping cocktails as they preened for selfies. "We need to talk," I said, dropping the dossier on the table with a weighty thump, preferably alone. Griffin glanced up lazily, seemingly unbothered by my stern expression. "What's got your pencil skirt in a twist this time?" I bit back a retort, reminding myself to stay calm and collected. Getting drawn into a shouting match would only give him more ammunition. "These are just some of the repercussions your behavior has triggered," I said, indicating the stack of documents with a pointed tap. Cancellations, financial risks, irreparable damage to Marwood's reputation that took decades to build. One of the influencers gasped dramatically. "OMG, there's like drama?" "Give us a minute," Griffin said with an indulgent chuckle, waving her away in a typical display of dismissive arrogance. Once they had reluctantly retreated, he turned his attention back to me with an exaggerated sigh. "So what's your big solution, sis? We fire a few incompetent employees, make some empty apologies, and everything's swept under the rug like always." "Not this time," I said, steeling my resolve. "I'm not going to cover for you or enable this path of self-destruction any longer. Either you make immediate, sincere efforts to make amends and change your ways." His brow furrowed in an unearned scowl of indignation as he sensed where I was heading. "Or you'll be permanently cut off from any involvement with the family business, financial, operational, everything." I held his gaze steadily, daring him to challenge my resolve. "Those are your options. It's time to make a choice." For once, Griffin seemed to have no snide retort at the ready. His mouth hung slightly ajar as the gravity of my ultimatum sank in. I could see the gears turning furiously behind his eyes as he weighed his next move. "You'll regret this," he finally muttered in a low, venomous tone. "Mark my words, you'll bitterly regret siding against your own flesh and blood." With that parting promise of retaliation, he shoved past me, nearly toppling his abandoned cocktail as he stormed off. I watched him go, feeling a profound sense of finality and dread over what fresh hell his revenge might unleash. True to his word, Griffin didn't let my ultimatum go unanswered. A few days after our heated confrontation, I was summoned to Martinez's office with a sense of trepidation. "What's going on?" I asked as I entered, noticing the grim set to Martinez's expression. "Mr. Griffin was just here," he said, sighing deeply, "making some rather extreme demands." My heart sank, dreading whatever new disaster my brother had cooked up. "What kind of demands?" Martinez slid a piece of paper across the desk. It appeared to be a freshly printed email, though the header had been redacted. "See for yourself." I snatched up the paper, my eyes quickly scanning the contents. It was an invoice for over $150,000 in miscellaneous charges, from room fees to spa services to God knows what else, all listed under Griffin's name. "He's demanding we erase this entire ledger," Martinez explained quietly, "immediately and without question, or else." "Or else what?" I prompted, my mouth going dry with dawning realization. Martinez held my gaze sympathetically. "Or else he'll take this matter public, leverage his media contacts, denounce us as defrauding him and the family legacy." I let out a shaky breath, trying to process this fresh onslaught. Of course he would stoop to such underhanded depths after I'd stood firm on my ultimatum. That arrogant piece of... I trailed off, clenching my fists to keep my temper in check. Losing my composure now would only feed into his game. "And that's not all," Martinez continued grimly. "He's demanding we terminate 3 employees. That server from the gala incident, the concierge on duty that night, and one of our senior receptionists claims they were rude and disrespectful towards him." My gut twisted as the full scope of Griffin's petty, malicious vendetta became clear. He sought to punish and humiliate not just me, but anyone peripherally associated with his embarrassment. "Well?" Martinez prompted, drawing me from my spiraling thoughts. "What would you like me to do?" For an insane, fleeting moment, I actually considered capitulating, if only to avoid the nightmare of a public crusade waged by my vengeful brother. But I knew that was just inviting further exploitation down the line, enabling the same toxic cycle to perpetuate. "Deny all of it," I said firmly, channeling every ounce of conviction. "We don't negotiate with terrorists, especially ones operating on such baseless, vindictive claims." Martinez's brow furrowed, but he gave a solemn nod of acceptance. "I'll respond accordingly and inform the employees as well. I expect he won't take this lying down." "I'm counting on it," I said grimly. Already, I could feel the gears turning as I began mentally preparing for the inevitable onslaught of retaliation. Sure enough, Griffin escalated matters in the days that followed. Angry emails and calls inundated my inbox and voicemail, hurling childish insults and accusations with reckless abandon. At one point, I happened to cross paths with him leaving the hotel gym. Before I could react, he shoved a crumpled printout into my hands, a gossip rag article breathlessly hyping the dark secrets of the Marwood dynasty with promises of exclusives on our bitter family feud. "That's just a preview of what's coming," he sneered, looming over me with undisguised malice. "You had your chance to make this right, Lila. Now the gloves are off. Let's see how precious your family legacy remains once I'm through with it." As he stormed off, I stared down at the wrinkled paper, clutched in my trembling hands. Despite the nauseous pit in my stomach, I couldn't deny a simmering sense of righteous resolution welling up. If Griffin thought he could bully and blackmail me into submission through petty intimidation, he was gravely mistaken. Our once-treasured family bonds might be ashes, but I wouldn't allow him to burn down everything else in his wildfire of egotistical entitlement and destruction. No matter how ugly the battle ahead might get, I would match his malice tit for tat to defend the precious legacy our parents had entrusted me to uphold. The war was only just beginning. Griffin didn't waste any time enacting his revenge scheme. Just days after his thinly veiled threats, I received word that he was organizing some sort of high-profile event at Marwood, a supposed comeback celebration, to attempt restoring his tarnished public image. "He's invited a slew of media personalities and potential investors," Martinez informed me grimly, "says he wants to reintroduce them to the true spirit of Marwood hospitality." I felt my blood pressure spike at the undisguised subtext. This was Griffin's gambit to undermine my authority and rally support for seizing control of the hotel's operations. Leverage his wealth and clout to present an extravagant spectacle, then decry my poor management. when the inevitable letdown occurred. Well, he had another thing coming if he thought I would simply stand by and allow this brazen coup attempt. "Let him plan whatever gaudy circus he wants," I said with a tight smile. "But ensure the staff is fully briefed. Every single accommodation and amenity must be cleared through me first. No exceptions." Martinez's eyes widened slightly, catching my meaning. Good. He understood the game plan. We would let Griffin cook up his fantasies of excess, then subtly deflate them before an audience. True to form, the demands for Griffin's party quickly grew outlandish and wildly unrealistic. Boxes of limited edition Cuban cigars to be provided as party favors, a live ice sculpture sculpting station, fur blankets imported from Siberia for outdoor lounging. I quietly vetoed each exorbitant request, replacing them with slightly upscaled but still reasonable compromises. Top-shelf liquor, simple ice sculptures, plush hotel robes, luxurious but sensible amenities in keeping with Marwood's reputation. On the night of the big event, guests arrived to find a posh but not overwhelmingly opulent gathering, with polished hospitality undergirded by Marwood's signature class and restraint. "Where are the premium whiskey tastings?" I overheard one perplexed patron asking an attendant. The invitations promised unique spirit pairings. The attendant simply smiled serenely. "I'm afraid there was some confusion, sir. Tonight we're offering selections from our exceptional reserve list, of course, but no official pairings or tastings scheduled." At that moment, Griffin swept in larger than life, reeking of aftershave and bravado. "Ah, the man of the hour!" He greeted me with a cold, mocking smile as he scanned the event space with obvious displeasure. "I must say, baby sis, your idea of true Marwood hospitality seems lacking." "I think it reflects our standard of unparalleled service and elegance," I said coolly. "Though I admit some of your requested enhancements did seem a touch gauche and out of step with our brand." His lip curled ever so slightly at the thinly veiled jab. "Well, you always did lack ambition. No matter, I'll be handling things my way soon enough." With that cryptic remark, he swanned off to schmooze with his assembled sycophants, no doubt already plotting his next move. Let him think he had the upper hand for now. As the night wore on, I made a point of circulating among the guests, shaking hands and engaging in idle small talk while furtively distributing small informational pamphlets. Innocuous trifolds printed on creamy cardstock, elegantly displaying key details. Marwood's history, amenities, room rates, ownership facts, and most crucially a breakdown of Griffin's astronomical outstanding debts and delinquencies to the hotel. I watched with a slim, predatory smile as clutches of guests began murmuring over the pamphlets, shooting sidelong glances at my oblivious brother loudly holding court across the room. Let the seeds of truth take root and flourish. By evening's end, Griffin's comeback had devolved into an awkward sputtering of second-hand embarrassment, his delusions laid bare before an audience of influential peers and power players. As the last trickle of guests exited, he turned on me with undisguised rage. "What did you do?" he hissed through clenched teeth. For once, I held all the high ground as I met his glare steadily. "I simply allowed Marwood to speak for itself," I said calmly. "The veneer of excess may beguile for a time, but the truth has a way of winning out eventually." Griffin opened his mouth, no doubt to unleash a fresh torrent of entitled bluster, but seemed to think better of it. With a contemptuous sneer, he stalked away in seething silence. I watched him go, finally allowing a satisfied smile to crease my lips as the thrill of hard-won victory washed over me. The battle might have been won, but the war still raged on. I had no illusions about that. But for now, I would savor this small, retributive victory, and steel myself for whatever ugliness lay ahead. The aftermath of Griffin's failed comeback event was even more satisfying than I could have hoped. Within days, the backlash and public humiliation he'd suffered began rippling outward in tangible consequences. "We've had 3 more investor meetings postponed indefinitely," Martinez reported to me, his usual calm demeanor tinged with relief. Apparently, the details about Mr. Griffin's outstanding debts gave them cold feet about proceeding with any new business for the time being. I allowed myself a tight smile at the news. As distasteful as airing such unsavory laundry had been, it was a necessary counterattack to protect Marwood's future from Griffin's toxic grasp. Sometimes the harsh truth had to be weaponized against those who would obscure or abuse it. Speaking of harsh truths, it wasn't long before Griffin himself came slinking back into my orbit, his tail proverbially tucked between his legs. I was overseeing preparations for a corporate fundraiser in the main ballroom when he sidled up beside me, uncharacteristically humble. "We need to talk," he muttered, not meeting my gaze. I arched an eyebrow, restraining a sarcastic response as I regarded him coolly. "I'm listening." He drew a deep, aggrieved sigh, as though merely addressing me was a heroic effort of long-suffering patience. When he finally made eye contact, I was mildly surprised by the naked desperation I saw simmering in his eyes. "What do you want from me, Lila?" The fight seemed to have drained from his voice, leaving a hollow rasp. "You've succeeded in ruining me, dismantling every professional tie and social connection I had left. Is that enough for you to be satisfied? Or do you intend to grind me into the dirt until there's nothing left?" For a fleeting moment, I almost felt a pang of pity. Almost. Quickly smothering that flicker of sympathy, I straightened my shoulders and held his gaze firmly. "I don't want to destroy you, Griffin," I said, enunciating each word with deliberate calm. "But neither can I simply allow you to keep sabotaging everything our family worked so hard to build through arrogance and exploitation." He opened his mouth, likely to demur or make excuses, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "You've sown the consequences of your actions, fair and square. That's on you, not me. If you want any hope of making amends or salvaging even a shred of personal credibility, it will take committed, sustained change and acceptance of responsibility." A muscle ticked in his jaw as he digested my stern verdict. I could practically see him waging an internal battle between indignant pride and humbling pragmatism. Finally, his shoulders slumped in seeming resignation. "What did you have in mind?" The words seemed to pain him, dragged out through gritted teeth. Rather than spelling out stringent terms on the spot, I decided to draw out the process, a fitting penance for all the grief and damage he'd caused through his thoughtless indulgences. "I'll have my legal team draft up a formal agreement outlining a long-term rehabilitative process," I said briskly. "Financial accountability, personal conduct clauses, avenues for proving sustained commitment to reforming your destructive patterns." Something flickered in his eyes, resentment at being dictated terms, perhaps. Good, it would be a harsh adjustment from his previously unbridled hubris. "Those are your options," I concluded. "Commit to meeting those stringent terms and benchmarks over an extended period, or be summarily excised from any involvement with Marwood Estate once and for all. No more second chances, no more games." He stared at me in unblinking silence, clearly wrestling with the crushing reality of his options. But we both knew that with his reputation and prospects fully immolated, he had no other viable path back into the family business, and by extension, any semblance of respectable society. Finally, he gave a terse nod of grudging acquiescence. "Fine, do what you must. Just send me the details when you have them drawn up." With that, he turned and skulked away, shoulders slumped in uncharacteristic defeat. I watched him go, equal parts vindicated and disquieted by the road that still lay ahead. Reforming Griffin would be an uphill battle, potentially even a losing one. But I owed it to my family's proud legacy to try, regardless of how the chips might ultimately fall. With Griffin's belligerent influence finally ousted from Marwood's operations, I was able to refocus my energy on restoring the hotel's reputation and recovering from the damage he'd inflicted. It was a slow, arduous process, but week by week, the negative online reviews and social media backlash began to subside. We've had 3 new 5-star reviews posted just in the last day, Martinez told me one morning, his usual stoic demeanor brightened by a thin smile. Guests praising the responsive service and attention to detail they experienced. I returned the smile, feeling a swell of pride. That's a testament to all the incredible work our team has put in to get us back on track. Please extend my gratitude to everyone. As summer transitioned into fall, the complaints and public relations headaches gradually tapered off, replaced by a steadily rebuilding stream of positive feedback. Marwood's elegant, family-friendly Thanksgiving celebration was a particular highlight, earning rave reviews from guests. We're effectively booked solid through the holiday season, Martinez updated me before one of our weekly management meetings. And 3 new investor groups have reached out expressing interest in exploratory talks for next quarter. The light at the end of the tunnel was finally coming into view. I allowed myself a private moment of satisfaction, hard-won, to be sure, but profoundly gratifying nonetheless. Slowly but surely, Marwood's legacy was being restored to its former luster. Of course, not everyone was thriving in the wake of the family implosion. News of Griffin's spectacular self-immolation swiftly made the rounds of our city's elite social circles. One by one, his fair-weather friends and professional contacts began cutting ties, unwilling to be seen cozying up to such a radioactive pariah. The Aldridge Foundation has confirmed they're discontinuing all previously pledged charitable donations connected to the Marwood name, Martinez informed me one day, mouth set in a grim line. Apparently, Griffin's reckless conduct and abuse of family privilege no longer aligns with their corporate values. I shook my head in a mixture of disgust and pity. It seemed Griffin's wanton ego had incinerated every last bridge, personal and professional. My brother now found himself well and truly isolated, his wealth and status rendered meaningless by his scorched-earth self-destruction. When I finally crossed paths with him at the hotel a few weeks later, the depths of his downfall were writ starkly across his haggard features. He was thinner, his customary designer clothes hanging looser on his frame, and his usual air of arrogant bluster had been replaced by a hunted, haunted look. "Leela," he rasped, voice little more than a croak as he approached me in a shadowed alcove of the lobby. I need to talk to you." I regarded him coolly, feeling very little of the vindictive gratification I might have expected. If anything, I just felt a hollow sort of pity watching this pathetic, broken version of the bombastic man who was once my brother. "About what?" I asked neutrally. "If it's more of the same threats and tantrums, I have no interest in indulging that toxicity further." He shook his head jerkily. No, nothing like that. I know you had the legal team draft up terms for me, conditions about reforming and redeeming myself and all that." Something flickered in his eyes. Desperation? Shame? I couldn't be sure. "Whatever it takes, I'll do it," he said, the words seeming to pain him. "I'm out of options here, Lila. You were right. I torched every other path I had. If there's any way back from this, any possibility of making amends, God, just name it. I'll agree to whatever you demand." Part of me wanted to balk, to spit venom and remind him of all the hurt and havoc he'd wreaked through his selfish rampages. But staring into his haunted, barely recognizable eyes, I could see the truth. He was already brutally punished, the self-inflicted damage likely to scar for years. With a slow exhalation, I reached into my briefcase and retrieved the thick manila envelope containing the formidable rehabilitation contract my lawyers had drafted. I extended it towards him, letting it dangle a few weighted inches from his grasp. "These are the terms," I said simply. "Study them in full. If you're truly committed to redeeming yourself, to doing the difficult personal work over an extended period, then we can discuss next steps." His shaking hand closed around the file, and he gave a jerky, solemn nod of understanding. There didn't seem much else to say after that. His fate, and any possible future role at Marwood, now rested entirely on his own shoulders. As I watched him retreat, shoulders slumped in wearied defeat, I felt an unexpected pang of conflicted emotion. Satisfaction, yes, but also sadness at witnessing such an ugly unraveling of family ties, and resignation that no matter how this rehabilitative journey played out, things could never truly be fully mended between Griffin and myself. The only path forward was to keep diligently upholding the values and ethics that defined Marwood's legacy, even if one day that meant permanently, irrevocably severing the final threads, still tenuously linking me to the black sheep who was once my brother.